Well, this week the Vatican held a conference on the future of the planet. Half of all the species alive today could be extinct by the end of this century unless steps are taken to improve conservation and to change human behaviour. One of the most contentious issues is the growth in the world's population. At the time of Christ, around 300 million people inhabited the globe. Today there are 7.4 billion. Experts say with 250,000 net added every day now, the world's population will reach more than 11 billion by the end of the century. The Pontifical Academy of Sciences, which organised the conference, says that in 1970 humans were using around 70% of the Earth's sustainable capacity. Today we're using about 156%. Yet 800 million people are chronically malnourished and 100 million are on the verge of starvation at any one time. They're huge problems that you can read about in your newspaper this morning. Changes must be made, they say, or there will be a sixth mass extinction on Earth. Does the planet need the Vatican to take an initiative here and accept contraception? Karen, 11.2 billion by the end of the century on this little rock spinning at this part of the universe. Can we cope? Can planet Earth cope?
Oh, the answer to the question is that we really don't know. We're taking a big gamble here with the future lives and well-being of billions of people, many of whom are alive already. Children today have a good chance of being alive at the end of the century and seeing whatever it is that we've created for them come to fruition.
Where will the resources come from?
Exactly. People often say, oh, we already produce enough food for 10 billion people. I haven't yet seen people say, oh, 11 billion, 12 billion. And these are perfectly possible numbers, by the way. As much as 13 billion is well within the range of certainty for the UN's projections. No one is saying that yet, but they're saying, oh, we already produce quite a lot of food, now we're going to be fine. What they don't mention is that we're producing food in an unsustainable manner. We're producing food in a way that destroys productive capacity of the earth. And some techno-optimists might say, oh, we'll figure something out. We might, and I certainly hope we will, but we just don't know.
We're pretty clever.
We are pretty clever, but we certainly don't know that it's going to happen. We don't know we're going to solve this problem. And population is not set in stone. Population trajectory is not set in stone. People can change their minds about how many children to have. And a lot of people today are not using contraception, not because they want to have a lot of children, but because they feel it's wrong. They've been told it's wrong. It's for God to decide how many children to have. And they are often feeling internal turmoil because they would like to provide for the children they already have.
So we're in trouble.
It's trouble for them. They feel unsupported by their cultural and religious leaders in their wish to have a smaller family. So we could so easily make people's lives better and reduce these enormous risks to human beings and to wildlife. It's not coincidence that we've lost more than half of wildlife at the same time as the human population doubled. Okay,
lots of issues there. Thank you very much. Dan, Deputy Editor of Catholic Herald. You know, we actually, you might not particularly care for the wild or for wildlife, but we need animals because we need forests. Animals sustain the forests. With no animals, there are no forests. I mean, and it's all about, oh, we need space. Humans going into ever more areas. It's the ecosystems are so important. But, I mean, how much does it trouble you that we are, for example, annihilating and destroying our closest relative, the great apes, because of habitat destruction for palm oil, for biscuits, for charcoal, for hardwood, and just for people? Does that trouble you?
It's a huge issue, both for the future of the human race and also for the beauty of the earth. If there's a
and
threat
for animals?
to it, yeah, absolutely, and for endangered species. If there's a threat, though, to the environment, it doesn't come from overpopulation, it comes from overconsumption. Look at fossil fuel emissions, which are a major threat to the environment. The average American produces the same amount of carbon emissions as 250 Ethiopians. The poorer half of the world's population produces just 7% of the emissions. So the problem is one with the rich world's consumption. And surprisingly,
palm oil is a very good example,
well,
actually.
Sorry,
palm oil is a very good example.
And surprisingly enough, the rich world, instead of saying we need to take a look at how we act, how we consume, how our society works, says, oh no, the real problem is poor people in Bangladesh being selfish and having more than 3 kids. I think we need to look urgently at what the West is doing.
Dan, those are the people who will get covered in the floods. Those will be the people who suffer from famine.
Yeah.
Those will be the people. You know, it's not a case of saying, oh, don't have any more children. It's actually saying, look, if we have too many children, you are the people who will suffer.
Sure, but the population growth is overwhelmingly in places which aren't creating the environmental problems. So if we need to look urgently at the environment, we need to look at our own actions. And the other aspect of this is a lot of people who are worried about overpopulation, population scientists like Stuart Brand, who were very involved in the 70s with the great panic about overpopulation, now say, we got it completely wrong. We didn't understand. The more people you have, the more creativity you have, the more ideas you have, and they're now worried about underpopulation. You'll get to the middle of the century and there's a problem. Yeah.
Good luck with getting President Trump to halve the living standards of the American people. We asked him to appear on the programme, but he doesn't like the BBC. John, the Pope said this is about greed. Dan put it very, very well there. If we consumed less, if we properly managed agriculture, if we properly respected and protected the wild and the beautiful, sentient, self-aware wild animals and dung beetles as well, and bumblebees, will be all right. It's all about being sensible, isn't it?
Of course it is. I think I have to agree with Dan. I think consumption is a dagger at the heart of the natural world. However, consumption is one of the crunches that we face. Population can never be extracted from this. I mean, for example, we have this idea, and I think Dan referred to it as underpopulation, the danger of underpopulation. We're currently adding 80 million people a year to the world population. Now, that's greater than the population of Great Britain. It's about the population of Germany still being added to world population every year. And the strange thing is that according to UN figures, approximately 80 million people have unintended pregnancies every year. So if we simply enable people to control and manage their own fertility in the way that they wish, and enable girls and young women to postpone first pregnancy and to complete their education, we would offer an economic benefit to the poor.
I want to come on to that in just a second.
Sure.
Let's just first of all address the wild and the natural world.
Sure. Because
people say, look, the ocean, the acidification of the oceans, look at whales, and it's their planet too.
Sure.
Look at what's happening in Africa. It's their planet too, these wonderful species. And are enough people aware of the fact that these are sentient, very often sentient, self-aware animals with an inner life?
Sure. When I started primary school in 1970, we had at that time 58% more wildlife in the world than we have today. It's collapsing at that rate. Now, the reason I bring that up is my kids are now in primary school, and they've asked me, well, look, if in your lifetime, in that 40-year period, about 2/3 of the animal world has been wiped out, what's going to happen when it comes to us, when we're adults? And when I am asked that question, the short answer is, if we continue on our current trajectory, there will be no natural world by the time my kids are adults. Now, that sounds like an extraordinary statement, but that's the trajectory we're heading on. Population is part of that, overconsumption is part of that, but they all work together.
Do you think we respect the natural world enough? The sentience, for example, of some of these animals?
Absolutely not. Carl Safina has written a wonderful book called Beyond Words, where he explores the rich psychological lives of intelligent creatures, like, for example, elephants. These are amazing social creatures who live in long-standing families headed by matriarchs up to 60 years of age. We humans haven't a clue about the natural world. We're terrific at expressing and articulating our own needs and our own desires and our own wants, but we are blundering like lumbering giants into the natural world. And the thing about it, this is the ultimate own goal. If we destroy the natural world, which, by the way, we're right on progress to do, if humans destroy the natural world, human society will collapse. There's no two ways about that.
So what about the resources? What about the mining? What about, Caspar, we do not have the resources. You know, they are finite. How are we going to cope?
Yeah, so I didn't buy any of that.
What didn't you buy?
Everything that was just said. Because,
everything?
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe in sentience in it being comparable to our sentience.
Well, look at the recent peer-reviewed science, but we'll move on from that. What about the resources?
Well, the resources, I mean, resources are only things that you happen to be using at a particular moment in history. You know, a couple of hundred years ago, oil wasn't a resource. You know, coal only became a resource at that time. Silicon has only become a resource in recent times. Now, I don't want to try and predict to the end of the century, because that is actually ludicrous. When I think about what's changed in my lifetime, I have no idea what resources will be the main resources that we'll be using for whatever purposes by the end of the century. And actually that's quite a good thing, you know, and it's the young people of today, the young kids of today, who are going to invent the world that will exist in 50, 70 years' time.
And they're going to look around and say there's no more wild. There's no more wildlife. There's no more wild animals. There's no more ecosystems.
That seems very, very unlikely, because, in fact, you know, people are inventive.
But we're exploiting the resources in those habitats. That's the problem. You have oil exploration, for example, in the Virunga National Park. You finish off the mountain gorillas, which they are self-aware creatures. They have an inner life. They have a right to be here.
I'm
not sure about that, but...
Not sure about what? What are you not sure about?
I'm not sure they have a right to be here.
Well,
isn't that right? Isn't that right, Caspar?
Because I think
but there's nothing other than humans have a right to be here. So
well,
for the 500 million years before humans arrived, we're only here 200,000 years. For the 500 million years before humans arrived, apparently, nothing mattered. It's an extraordinary conceit.
Yeah.
And if you may I just take up the argument that we don't know a resource people are going to be using in the future. I think we can be pretty sure people are still going to use fresh water for a lot of their survival needs. People are still going to need food. People are still going to need livelihoods and sources of energy. And all of those things are under significant strain. And it's quite irresponsible to say, oh, we'll figure something out and continue as we are, when we can, with so little pain to ourselves, adjust the trajectory of our cultures and population.
But what is it pain? Aren't we too set? Aren't we too set? Hang on. Aren't we too set on our material comforts and our material benefits?
It is extremely hard to change consumption. It's extremely hard to change consumption. And people say it's all about consumption. Grossly fail to suggest ways to do that. And I don't want to underplay the importance of finding ways to reduce consumption, but it's incredibly hard. But to make it as though population doesn't matter, it is just showing a tremendous lack of compassion, not only to wildlife, but to people, to human beings that are in countries experiencing fast population growth, where unemployment is rife.
And to women. This is can I pick up the point that you started with? Dan, I bring Dan back in here. We have a situation here that we have a church run by men who've never known a woman, telling women that they should have lots of children.
Not at all. The church is not just bishops in Rome. The church is the biggest charitable organisation beyond any comparison on earth. So it includes doctors, nurses, missionaries, many, many women.
What about reproductive rights,
women's
reproductive rights?
Well, I mean, the data I've shown suggests that there is vast distribution of contraceptives across the developing world, often at the expense of the healthcare women need and the real needs of people in the developing world. So, for instance, there's an archbishop in Ghana.
It's a sin to take.
Well, okay, there's an archbishop in Ghana who says he ran a network of hospitals and clinics, and they could not get support from the major NGOs and agencies because they refused to provide abortion and contraception at the hospital. That is prioritising an ideology of population control over what people need. There are innumerable stories, again, of medical staff who say, women come to me needing penicillin for their sick children, needing malaria medication. I don't have it. What I have is shelves full of condoms, because that's what the NGOs will
privileging an ideology, Claire.
Well, if we're privileging the rights of women and girls, then that's fine by me. Yes, we need to alter the Vatican's view on contraception. And it seems to me it's a win-win. We might help with population, but we would also help reduce poverty, and we might also have a better economic situation, and that's a win-win all round.
Yeah?
Well, I think the church knows. I mean, the church is...
There's no chance of this happening on contraception, is there?
No, some things in Catholicism can't change, and this is one of them. But I don't think that should be a worry, because the church is on the ground. It knows what people need. It knows the causes of deprivation. war, poverty, a lack of infrastructure, political corruption. Everywhere the church is working against these things. Look at Congo, which is a Democratic Republic of Congo, threatened by war and resulting famine. Who is it who's negotiating a peace deal that could save, hundreds of thousands of lives? It's the church who are there. Who is it who's handing out medical aid, educating, giving help to more people than any other institution in the world? It's the Catholic Church. So I think we should trust the church on this.
Okay, trust the church is great. Let's take the Philippines. It is the highest birth rate in Asia. Now, in the Philippines, we have 500,000 illegal abortions a year, 2,500 Filipino women a year dying as a result of illegal abortions. And that is the handiwork of the Catholic Church in the Philippines. Women and girls' rights to control their own fertility, tooth and nail. It has resisted it. It's taken 12 cases to the Supreme Court in the Philippines. So the idea that you can't get penicillin for your child because the shelves are heaving with condoms is...
Well, the Philippine Medical Association say differently. They have opposed the legislation in the Philippines to provide more contraception because they say that money would be better spent providing better maternal care.
Who controls the Philippine Medical Association?
Well, I imagine Philippine doctors. I mean, that's my point, though. There are a lot of people on the ground who say, on health grounds, what we need is more funds for maternal care. And many Filipinos opposed the introduction of contraception and abortion because they say this is a foreign ideology, this is not what we need.
Well, just on foreign ideologies again, I'm a little sceptical. Maybe it's coming from Ireland. When we were effectively a Catholic state for the first 70 years of our independence, and we saw the brunt of the Church's interest in babies up to the moment of their birth. Beyond that point, they lost interest in them. And we have all in fails. Now, I find it... The secular state in Ireland finally wrestled some control away from the Church, and I personally find it tragic to see the same mistakes being made in countries like the Philippines right now that we in Ireland were the victims of.
I think that overlooks the huge contribution the Church makes, which, I say it again, isn't equalled by any other body in the world.
How do you keep population down?
Well, do you need to keep population down when so many population scientists are saying
do we need to
it
keep
could be too
population
low?
down?
Yes, we do. And I hope you're not going to tell us the population of 100 billion people will be fine, or 30 billion people will be fine. These are all possible worlds.
Well, the UN projection is we peak at about 11 to 12 billion.
Do you know what the UN projection was a few years ago? The UN projection a few years ago was that we would peak at 9 billion. It's now 11.2 billion. All of these projections build in quite a lot of assumptions that fertility will fall. They are not just extrapolation from current trends. If you extrapolate from current trends, our population at the end of the century is 26 billion. If we extrapolate. And I was quite interested in how you think that family planning is not something that women need. That what they need is medical care, but they don't really need birth control.
We're going to have to leave it there. What an interesting debate. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you. Likewise, the other two. As always, the debates continue online and on Twitter. Canterbury next week. Do join us then. From now, goodbye. Well, this week, the Vatican held a conference on the future of the planet. Half of all the species alive today could be extinct by the end of this century unless steps are taken to improve conservation and to change human behaviour. One of the most contentious issues is the growth in the world's population. At the time of Christ, around 300 million people inhabited the globe. Today there are 7.4 billion. Experts say with 250,000 net added every day now, the world's population will reach more than 11 billion by the end of the century. The Pontifical Academy of Sciences, which organised the conference, says that in 1970 humans were using around 70% of the Earth's sustainable capacity. Today we're using about 156%. Yet 800 million people are chronically malnourished and 100 million are on the verge of starvation at any one time. They're huge problems that you can read about in your newspaper this morning. Changes must be made, they say, or there will be a sixth mass extinction on Earth. Does the planet need the Vatican to take an initiative here and accept contraception? Karen, 11.2 billion by the end of the century on this little rock spinning at this part of the universe. Can we cope? Can planet Earth cope?
Oh, the answer to the question is that we really don't know. We're taking a big gamble here with the future lives and well-being of billions of people, many of whom are alive already. Children today have a good chance of being alive at the end of the century and seeing whatever it is that we've created for them come to fruition.
Where will the resources come from?
Exactly. People often say, oh, we already produce enough food for 10 billion people. I haven't yet seen people say, oh, 11 billion, 12 billion. And these are perfectly possible numbers, by the way. As